Hey everybody. In case you don't know who Geoff Duncan is, he's a conservative Republican and the former lieutenant governor of Georgia. And he came out a few days ago with an op-ed in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution called Why I'm Voting for Joe Biden and Other Republicans Should Too. And the key line from that article is, unlike Trump, I've belonged to the GOP my entire life. This November, I'm voting for a decent person I disagree with on policy over a criminal defendant without a moral compass. Now, Duncan isn't a never-Trumper by any means. Unlike me, he voted for Trump in 2016 and again in 2020. But he's seen enough, and he's not only moving on from Trump personally, he's encouraging others to do so as well. But here's the kicker. He's urging them to vote for Joe Biden. Now, I'm sharing this because, in my view, this is a shocking case of normalcy. And so I'm going to read this quote again. He says, unlike Trump, I've belonged to the GOP my entire life. This November, I'm voting for a decent person I disagree with on policy over a criminal defendant without a moral compass. Now, if you've listened to me for a while, you'll know that I was a Republican my whole life, but Donald Trump and his followers drove me away ever since 2016. And I've been rethinking pretty much everything I believed about politics ever since. I'm in process on all of that. But that's not who Geoff Duncan is. He's still a Republican. And if you listen to him in interviews, he says all sorts of things that would probably irritate a lot of Democrats. But he's going to vote for Joe Biden. So here he is talking to Laura Coates on CNN about this.
Look, the play for a conservative like me that cares about the future of this country is to build the necessary majorities in the Congress so that we can have a meaningful checks and balance system if Joe Biden's the president. And look, I've said this in the op-ed. I'm voting for a decent person that I disagree with on policies over a criminal defendant who has no moral compass. And that's not tough to argue, right? Those are proven facts.
Now, I also watched him talk with Tim Miller about this on the Bulwark podcast, and I'll link to that entire interview below. And Tim said exactly what I've been thinking.
You know, this is the thing. I kind of feel like this should not be like that bold of a statement that you're going to vote against a criminal defendant without a moral compass. But unfortunately, you're standing out in this regard.
Yeah, let me set the table by saying it feels like my new motto is honesty is the new crazy, right? Just saying the honest, like calling honest balls and strikes seems to get the most attention these days. But yeah, look, Donald Trump has infiltrated the Republican Party as a fake Republican. There's nothing that he's really done. He's certainly a broken clock's right twice a day, and he stumbled into a few conservative policies and whatnot. But at the end of the day, he started this process not as a Republican, and nothing that we look at going forward is got, Donald Trump, the Republican Party, as Donald Trump being our future.
Now, the most common question that I get on this channel, even from people who agree with me about Trump, is how am I able to make the decision to vote for Joe Biden? And I always respond something like this. I say, I'm not endorsing Joe Biden, and it's not my purpose to get other people to vote for him if that means that they'll be going against their conscience in some major way. But I'm honest that my process led me to vote for Biden in 2020 after voting third party in 2016. And I plan to vote for him again. But I say that as a truth in advertising sort of thing, not as an endorsement. I have serious concerns about Donald Trump. And as a pastor, I'm raising those concerns to Christians. My goal when I talk about Trump is to urge people to reject him. But it's beyond the scope of what I'm doing here to make a case for Joe Biden or any candidate. But Geoff Duncan goes further than I do, and I think conservatives should hear him out.
How do you respond to people who say, then have a third party option, write someone else in, but why vote for a Democrat?
Look, sometimes the best way to learn your lesson is to get beat, and Donald Trump needs to get beat. We need to move on as a party. We need to move on as a country. And certainly I've got concerns with some of the policies that President Biden follows, and I hope to be able to, like many other Republicans, be able to sway their influence on immigration and other issues that we disagree with wholeheartedly.
Now, the next clip I'm going to play is so important because Duncan talks about the moment that he finally knew that he had to walk away from Trump.
Yeah, that moment that we talked about is just so vivid in my mind. I mean, I was sitting in my office at the Capitol, post 2020 election, and there's armed guards with, automatic weapons outside my office, making sure that Republicans now, not any sort of, like foreign militia, but Republicans don't attack the Capitol because we wouldn't admit that the 2020 election was rigged, because actually it wasn't. And we knew that, all the proof. But I think that the takeaway now, a few years removed, is just how vile and visceral Donald Trump has turned the Republican Party on its head on. Because up until that point, I was a rock solid conservative in their eyes, right? I was championing the heartbeat bill. I was championing other conservative policies. Brian Kemp and I were budgeting we had billions of dollars in our state savings account, unlike the federal government.
I mean, whether you agree with Duncan or not, he's a conservative guy. He just talked about the fetal heartbeat bill. But look at what he's not doing. He's not demonizing Joe Biden to the point that he could never consider voting for him. Political scientists call it negative partisanship, when people come to despise the other side so much that they'll excuse any offense from their own party because no matter what, the other party is the lowest of the low. Duncan isn't engaging in negative partisanship here. He's engaging in normal partisanship. So here's an example from the interview with Tim Miller again. The listener can agree or disagree with Duncan's assessment of how Joe Biden has handled the immigration issue, and he is hard on Biden for it. But then he tells the truth about the negotiations that they had in Congress over the issue.
We had a very legitimate argument against the Biden administration on their initial immigration efforts, right? It was awful, right? We were watching this, and it all came down to a sounding board where, Joe Biden just basically said, we're going to do this thing a lot different than Donald Trump. And word got out to South America that we were going to do things different than Donald Trump. And so they started to flood the border and overwhelm the resources. So then we finally message enough and gallivant enough and put pressure and get the Biden administration through the Langford legislation. And then we balk at it because Donald Trump says, why are we going to give these guys a win? Why would we dare take this issue off the table? We need to dig in and not support this effort, where we should have been mature enough to take the deal and then remind everybody in America that deal happened because we kept constant, steady pressure on doing the right thing.
Now, what he's describing here is normal politics. People who disagree about important issues, working out their differences and coming to a compromise. I wish that this wasn't unusual. I'm happy, personally, to listen to anyone, liberal, progressive, conservative, whatever label we want to put on it, if they're just honest. The way that we get somewhere in this country is when people debate and disagree, but they don't demonize the other side, and they eventually work out a compromise. Geoff Duncan is just asking us to do that, and he's willing to vote for the candidate for president from the opposing party in order to help the country to get back to that.
But history's not going to be kind to Donald Trump. The quicker we purge this, and look, if it means working with the other team, so be it. Let's do it, and let's do it well. Look, this guy has made no mystery of what he's going to do day one when he gets in there. He's going to be a reckless dictator that simply gravitates towards being 1% more powerful every day he's in office. And to me, this country's too important. The future of my 3 kids is too important to just give the keys to somebody like that just because they have an R next to their name. And by the way, it's a fake R.
By the way, there's a big difference between demonizing the opposition and opposing a candidate. Duncan has made the same decision that I made years ago. He's decided that Donald Trump poses a threat to the nation, and because of that, he has to speak out. That's not demonizing Trump. That's not hating Trump. That's facing reality based on years of evidence and speaking truth, because that's what serious people do. Now, as a special treat, the last clip that I'm going to play is actually a pretty hopeful one for someone like me. Laura Coates asked Geoff Duncan if she thought that people in Georgia would listen to him. It's his opinion that Georgia will vote for Joe Biden in the end, and he said this.
When these court cases play out on TV in the suburbs, specifically women in the suburbs, are paying attention to these cases, there's not a single one of them that's going, oh, you know what? I've changed my mind on this Donald Trump guy. He's just a fantastic human being. He's a perfect leader for our country. That's just not happening. And so I think as we get closer and closer to November, this election is going to pull further and further away from Donald Trump, and therefore Joe Biden will end up walking away with this election.
Well, from your lips to God's ears, Geoff Duncan. Thanks for listening.